It's Portal-Palooza. We are 2.5 weeks into the winter transfer portal period, and there's some Big Ten teams that are enjoying their Christmas gifts that they've gotten so far via the transfer portal as they look forward to a bright and happy 2025. In this edition of Big Nation, we cover the latest Big Ten transfer portal headlines.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
Has by far been the busiest December, not only in the college football world, but for me personally, in a very, very long time, folks. We've got college football playoff first round games. That's really moved up that type of coverage as well. Transfer portal early signing period was moved up 1 week earlier as well this week. And then, of course, the older and older you get, the more people you have to buy Christmas presents and Christmas gifts for. So the holidays is just a jam-packed time in general. I haven't had a lot of time to be able to cover transfer portal movement so far, but here I am. There is a lot to cover. There's a lot of exciting things, a lot of exciting gifts that some Big Ten teams have found under the Christmas tree so far. Let's dive in and start first with a couple of quarterback, running back combinations where there is a fair amount of optimism in both Ann Arbor, Michigan and Bloomington, Indiana. Let's start first with the cream and crimson Curt Cignetti's Indiana Hoosiers. They landed one of the top quarterback prizes in the portal by getting Fernando Mendoza, the former California Golden Bears quarterback. This is the guy. He took visits to Georgia. He took visits to Missouri before Missouri went out and got former Penn State quarterback Bo Pribula. He is the third-ranked quarterback in this portal class. Over 3,000 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year. Completed 68% of his passes. There was a game earlier this season against Wake Forest. He attempted over 50 passes. He completed over 40 of them in that game as well. So even when he has a high volume of attempts, he is still completing a large amount of passes. Everybody saw that post-game interview for him in a hard-fought victory this season, and you can tell he's got that leadership mentality. He's got those leadership qualities that people really want to rally behind. And this duo that I'm talking about for Indiana, it is production over potential personified, something that we know Curt Cignetti, Mike Shanahan, and this entire coaching staff really believes in. Fernando Mendoza. Now, we know Curtis Rourke had just 1 year of eligibility. Fernando Mendoza has 2 years of eligibility, certainly, if he wants it. Now, Indiana saw Taven Jackson transfer out of the program, so it's great that you've got Mendoza on your team right now, and I think Indiana is going to pick up certainly right where they left off at the quarterback position, but they've also got to try to find a way to figure out what their future certainly is at the quarterback position as well. And when you look at what's returning for Indiana, maybe some targets that Fernando is going to be able to throw to. We'll see what happens with Elijah Surratt, but he could come back. Keyshawn Williams could come back. Omar Cooper could come back. Boy, they're going to run it back. I know the schedule is much tougher for the Hoosiers in 2025, in theory, than it was in 2024. But folks, this is an Indiana team, and I said it when I was at that cabin in northern Minnesota before Indiana renewed the contract, or re-upped the contract, extended the contract of Curt Cignetti. I said, this is going to be something that we're going to have to get used to. I'm not saying Curt is going to go out and they're going to win 11 games each and every single year, but they're going to be that threat. I think they're going to be winning 8 or more games possibly every season because they laid in a great blueprint. They laid some great groundwork, and now you have players that noticed what they did at JMU and then seeing what they've did in 1 year at a Power 2 conference in the Big Ten at Indiana, you're going to have quarterbacks, you're going to have skill players that are going to want to flock to Bloomington, Indiana. Imagine saying that 365 days ago. Now, let's talk about the running back that they brought in. Big Ten fans should be familiar with him. Former Maryland Terrapin running back, Roman Hemby. Now, the last couple of years haven't been as impressive. 2023 and 2024, he combined for over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. But 2022, when he was a sophomore at Maryland, or would that have been his freshman season? Either way, in 2022, that was the really big season where he really showed the pop and what he can do in the run game. He rushed for 989 yards and 10 touchdowns that season for Maryland. I remember over the course of his career, and specifically that season in 2022, 3 years ago, he had a uncanny ability to break off the explosive run. The explosive run, those 50-yard runs, those 60-yard runs, his ability, his patience to be able to find the hole, hit it, and boom, he's got the speed and the explosiveness to certainly get to the next level. You look at what's possibly sticking around in this running back room. Once again, there's a lot of reason for optimism. They're not going to have Justice Ellison. He runs out of eligibility, but also Tyson Lawton and Kalen Black could also come back. So now you've got a trio of running backs. Now you still have a really good quarterback. You have some receivers that are coming back. Aiden Fisher is coming back on the defensive side. All of a sudden you look around and said, Curt Cignetti could run it back, baby, in year number 2. Let's go ahead over to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Why don't we? All right, folks, we have our bridge. Will it be a short little bridge just going over a stream, medium bridge going over a river, or is this going to be a large bridge that's going to go over the whole length of the season, going to go over this big lake that is the 2025 season? Mikey Keene is that bridge at the quarterback position to Bryce Underwood, the former Fresno State Bulldog and UCF Knight. He's combined for over 5,800 yards, 42 touchdowns, 21 picks over the last 2 seasons at Fresno State. And I'm just very curious to see how short the leash is going to be for Mikey. And because there's going to be a lot of pressure to play Bryce Underwood right away. The amount of money that collective, and everybody from the Dave Portnoys to the collective to everybody else, the amount of money that they spent to get a player like Bryce Underwood, to keep him inside the state of Michigan, there's going to be a lot of pressure to see him at some time or another in 2025. Like, what if Mikey Keene is playing okay, but he's not playing great in the middle of the season, 6 games in, 7 games in, and at that point, Bryce Underwood really understands and has adapted to this new playbook. I think at that point in the season is where you're really going to see which direction this Michigan coaching staff is going forward. I'm not sure how likely it is that Mikey's going to play the entire 12 games of the regular season. Look, I look at him, I think he's certainly a good option. He is certainly a gigantic upgrade over Davis Warren and Alex Orji from last season. He's certainly got some mobility to him. He's certainly got some scoot in him. I think he's a good thrower of the football. Is he a great thrower of the football? I'm not sure if I would certainly say that as of right now at the quarterback position with him, but he's certainly got the added dimension of his mobility, was really good in the RPO game over there at Fresno State. So it's very intriguing to certainly see what's going to happen with Michigan at the quarterback position. And how about the running back they brought in? Justice Haynes transferring over from Alabama. 448 yards, 7 touchdowns with the Crimson Tide this past season. But when he came out in high school, the class of 2023, he was the number 29 player in the country. He was the number 3 running back in the country that year. He was a 5-star in the 24/7 Sports composite rankings. And really, when I look at Justice Haynes right there, sitting around 6 feet, I think he's 5'11", 200 pounds. I see many things within his arsenal. I see many things that he can do. He can put his shoulder down and he can play contact football, but he's also got a really great ability to hit the home run ball. Patience and vision, I think, are really good. Everything just seems so easy. Everything just seems so smooth for Justice. His ability to wait, find the hole, and then boom, that explosiveness to get through there. He just looks like a Michigan running back. Okay, if you're a player of this talent and of this much accolade coming out of high school, and then you play at Michigan. Look, I know you look at Mikey Keene at quarterback and Bryce Underwood and their skill set, right? You say, well, this team might be going in a little bit of a different direction offensively. But I still think this is Michigan. They still got the winged helmets. They still got the maize and blue. Sharon Moore still says smash. I still think running the football is going to be an essential part to Michigan's offense, certainly next season. Kaleo Mullins technically still has a year of eligibility left. He rushed for over 900 yards, leading the Wolverines. Can you imagine that 1-2 tandem? And then you combine that with the elusiveness from both of these guys at the position, whether it's Keene or whether it's Underwood, that could be a dangerous combination all the way around. And I think these running backs, Haynes, we'll see if Mullins sticks around. If he doesn't, you got a guy like Benjamin Hall back there. You got Jordan Marshall, who they really like, certainly back there in that running back room. I think it's going to take some pressure off of this passing game. This is also a Michigan team that brought in Donovan McCulley at wide receiver. A couple of years ago, he was the leading receiver over there at Indiana, a tall, athletic player on the outside. So I think it's very clear, it's very certain, Michigan certainly making some big strides and big upgrades right now as far as the offense goes, which is certainly a step in the right direction. I talked about this during the schedule release. Michigan has a favorable schedule. Things are really starting to come together for the Maize and Blue as we look forward to next season. Where else are things coming together? Minneapolis, Minnesota. Big thumbs up to you, Dinkytown athletes. Big thumbs up to you, everybody, PJ Fleck and everybody building this roster for 2025 over there within this Golden Gophers program. They are starting to stack together a really, really good transfer portal class. I want to first start at the skill positions for Minnesota. Let's start first at the wide receiver spot. Now, Malachi Coleman, right, came out as a top 150 player in the country at Lincoln East High School, right outside of Nebraska, right in that same town that is Lincoln, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. He had a long touchdown catch. I think that wasn't this year. I think that was the year before, maybe. But he had a long touchdown catch that was very exciting to say, hey, this is the type of explosiveness. This is the type of play that we're going to be able to get out of a guy like Malachi. But it just never hit. He never got enough playing time to really show what he can truly do. But he's a very athletic guy, and he's got a frame that is very difficult to defend. If Minnesota can harness that athletic ability, if they can harness that potential, this is a player that could be a real diamond in the rough in this transfer portal class. He could really turn into a really good and a really exciting player, but he's going to have a lot of competition, specifically in the 2025 season. Now, a player with the frame of Malachi, you might split him out the X position, the Z position there out wide on the perimeter, but you move closer to the offensive line, you move closer to the ball, and that's where you find Logan Loya, transferring in from UCLA, 5'11", 185. Now, this past year for UCLA as a whole, of course, wasn't great. His production took a little bit of a step down, but when you look at Logan, you got to look at that 2023 season. 59 catches, 655 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, when I watch Logan Loya, he's that annoying slot receiver. He's that New England Patriots type of slot receiver, the Julian Edelman type, the Wes Welker type, when it's a 3rd and 5 or a 3rd and 6, and you're focused on this guy out here and you're focused on that guy out there, you just got Loya in the slot. He's running that 5 to 6 yard slant. He's running that 5 to 6 yard out route. He makes the play. He keeps the chains moving. This is a big pickup, I think, for the Golden Gophers. I really like what they did here. A lot of diversity in what they've brought in from the receiver position. We talk about the size and the frame of Malachi and the athleticism. We talk about the annoyance, so to speak, in the slot. That is Logan Loya. And then we take a look at the burner on the outside, Javon Tracy from Miami of Ohio. This past season, 57 catches, 818 yards, and 7 touchdowns with the Red Hawks. You take those guys, you combine them with Lameki Brockington. That's the elder statesman now in that group. Christian Driver, Tyler Williams. There's a lot to play with. There's a lot of gifts under the Christmas tree at the wide receiver position for Minnesota right now. We all know Darius Taylor, one of the most talented running backs in the Big Ten, is RB1 for the Golden Gophers, but they lost a lot, whether it was guys running out of eligibility or other guys going into the transfer portal at running back. They needed to go into the portal and get depth. That's exactly what they did. They did a really good job. How about Cam Davis? in that 2022 season for Washington, that was the first Michael Penix Jr. season up there in Seattle. He led the Huskies in touchdown rushes that year. He was second in the team in rushing for over 500 yards that season. He is certainly a capable back, but then he got injured, and then this season, of course, a new coaching staff came in. Jonah Coleman happened, over 1,000 yards for the Huskies that season, so he didn't really get as much carries. I think Cam Davis could come in and be a pretty effective number 2 back for Minnesota, certainly. They brought in A.J. Turner, who put up some good production at Marshall. Cole Cabana transfers over from Michigan. He was a 4-star, talented prospect. Here's the thing with all of these guys. They may not be the biggest guys in the world, but they do what Minnesota likes. Minnesota likes guys that can catch the ball out of the backfield, even though you have a guy like number 1. Even though you have a guy like Darius Taylor, this is a Minnesota program that likes to rotate in a lot of backs. I think a lot of these guys are going to be able to see a lot of time. I think Minnesota has the potential to be the surprise of 2025. Now, I know they got to go at Ohio State. They got to play at Oregon, so maybe they won't do the 11-1 that Indiana did this past season, but there's a lot of pieces that Minnesota fans are excited about. I talked about what's on offense. You're looking on defense, specifically the defensive line. I have Lawrence, Russan Lawrence here at in this graphic, who was a first-team All-CAA performer on the defensive line as well. So they got a couple of defensive line transfers coming in, but Danny Strigo, John Joyner, Jalen Logan Redding, Devin Eastern, Jackson Howard, like all of these guys could be back on the D-line. Cody Lindenberg, the great linebacker, is going to be back. Coy Parrish had a fantastic freshman season back there at safety. He is going to be back. There are a lot of pieces that can come together for PJ Fleck's Golden Gophers next year. They got to figure out what they're doing at quarterback. Is it going to be Drake Lindsley? They got a quarterback transfer from Georgia Tech. I'm not overly excited about either of those options. Offensive line, losing a lot of pieces as well. So they got to figure out quarterback. They got to figure out O-line to see if they can be that surprise team, maybe win 9 or 10 games next season. Folks, we got a long way to go before that happens. Moving from Minnesota to some teams that are going to be playing for, or at least trying to advance towards a national championship. These two teams are going to be meeting at the Rose Bowl, Ohio State and Oregon on New Year's Day. They're doing exactly what teams of their caliber should be doing, taking low numbers in terms of transfers, but the transfers that they do take are high-level and elite-level caliber players that are plugging holes for a year or 2 years. When you recruit at the level that the Ducks and the Buckeyes do, it's a matter of developing that talent, because if you can get that 5-star talent to stay there, these guys aren't transferring. This is the creme de la creme. These are the guys, the cream of the crop within their high school class every single year. There's not going to be guys of this talent level in the transfer portal. So it's important to be able to recruit and important to be able to develop that when you recruit at the level that the Ducks and the Buckeyes do. But the transfer portal is being used as places to be able to plug where they maybe don't quite have the development, or they're a little bit younger at those particular spots. Now, Friday night, I'm going to have an exclusive Oregon live stream, so I'm not going to cover the Ducks as much, certainly right now, but the secondary is what really stands out to me. They're going to lose everybody. They're going to lose everybody back there. So getting a guy like Dylan Thieneman, one of the best safeties, portal or not, in all of college football. He was kind of used to doing everything at Purdue. He's going to be playing with elite players around him, so maybe he won't have to do everything. That might be a little bit of adjustment, certainly for Dylan. Theron Johnson, an all Big Ten player coming over from Northwestern. This is the definition, where you're a little bit younger now in the secondary. Hey, maybe those guys aren't as developed to be starters in the Big Ten quite yet. Hey, let's go out and get a couple of guys that have been effective starters in the Big Ten to be able to plug into that secondary. And then you look at this Ohio State program right now. They got a tight end from Purdue. Speaking of Purdue, in Max Clare, 685 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2024. With all due respect to G. Scott Jr., with all due respect to Jelani Thurman, I think Max Clare would be the starting tight end. He's a great, on this team right now, in this Rose Bowl team, he's a great pass catcher. Really tall, big target. He does a great job at getting open. I think that he can have a big year in this Ohio State offense, playing with the type of talent that could be in Columbus, Ohio next season as well. C.J. Donaldson, we know Henderson and Judkins aren't going to be there next season. You go out and get a guy like C.J. Donaldson out of West Virginia in the portal, 6'2", 238 pounds. He combined for over 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns the last 2 years over there in a great rushing attack at West Virginia. I think he's going to be able to come in and be one of the Big Ten's best running backs, no question about that. Offensive line, a little bit of a question mark at the beginning of the season. Of course, the injuries have certainly made that a little bit more well-known. Phillip Daniels from Minnesota. Ethan Onianwa comes over from Rice. Those are two big pickups at the tackle position. Got to protect your asset. Got to protect your young quarterback, slated to be Julian Sayin next season. Let's head over to Lincoln, Nebraska. This is a team, I think this year they did not utilize their players on the perimeter as much as they should have. They didn't have a ton of explosiveness this season. And I think with these two wide receiver transfers that are coming in, they are certainly upgrading their explosiveness. And I think we're starting to see the groundwork being laid of what a Dana Holgorsen offense and what the personnel within a Dana Holgorsen offense is really going to look like. Let's start first with Isaiah Hunter. He comes over and transfers over from Cal. Young kid, freshman last year, or this year I should say, 40 catches, 578 yards, and 5 touchdowns. But the great get, the big pickup in this class at wide receiver for Nebraska is Dane Key, coming over from Kentucky. In his career, combined for over 1,800 yards, 14 touchdowns in 3 years in Lexington, Kentucky. He's a guy that can get big plays over the top. And Dana Holgorsen wants to surround his prized quarterback with a lot of great weapons. And these are certainly two trending in the right direction. Now, here's the great thing about this. Is you got these two guys. That's fantastic. That's great. And then you got Jamal Banks, 508 yards, 3 touchdowns this past year. You got Jalen Lloyd. I really thought that they would utilize the track speed of Jalen Lloyd a little bit more on the deep ball, but maybe that's more of a Marcus Satterfield thing and him maybe not scheming things up or calling things the correct way to utilize the talent that was in Lincoln. Maybe a guy like Dana Holgorsen, Mr. Air Raid, is certainly going to get Jalen Speed more involved. And Ja'Cory Barney, right? They just tried to get Ja'Cory Barney in a variety of ways, whether it was with the run game, short pass game. When he touched the ball, he really seemed to make plays as a freshman this last season. So you kind of see it laid out, and Nebraska has a lot of weapons out there on the perimeter. Don't forget a tight end, a guy like Thomas Vidoni that can come back for one more season as well. So that should be a lot of fun to see what this pass game certainly looks like. And then you look at the running back position. Dante Dowdell left. Emmett Johnson did stay around. Gabe Urban Jr. is out of this program. So maybe the running backs seen the writing on the wall a little bit, where maybe this isn't going to be as much of a run-heavy scheme that it was supposed to be, at least this season, and maybe Dana's going to lean a little bit more into the pass game. This is an offense that's maybe going to be a little bit more explosive next season. Either way, thumbs up to Nebraska for getting better out on the perimeter. All right, we're going to wrap things up and talking about USC, not on offense with Lincoln Riley, but we're going to be talking about defense, specifically the defensive line. I think as more time goes by and you start to see what's coming back, you start to see what's coming in, there's, I think, some optimism for USC fans and what they're building slowly and steadily up front on the defensive line. Now, I did mention last week, I did mention before Christmas, there is concern when you lose guys like Zachariah Branch and you lose Quentin Joyner to Texas Tech, you lose Deuce Robinson over to Florida State, right? That first recruiting class that Lincoln Riley had, a lot of these guys just aren't there anymore. And of course, we know Lincoln Riley's specialty is the offensive side of the football. But when you look to defense, this defensive line is really starting to form into a group that maybe USC fans can start to get excited about a little bit. We saw this defense really improve this season a lot. They got a long way to go, but we saw it really improve. Now, the additions of Georgia's Jamal Jarrett and Kentucky's Keyshawn Silver is about one thing, baby. It's about one thing. It's about that Big Ten beef. These are some big boys, and USC needed to get bigger. They needed to get beefier in the middle. They just needed big bodies, and these two guys, These are some big bodies. Silver, 23 starts at Kentucky. How about 6'4", 336 pounds? But that's not all, folks. That's not all, folks. Jamal Jarrett, younger guy. He was a 4-star prospect from a couple of years ago. Played in the All-American Bowl over there at Georgia. Played sparingly this season. But when you look at his size, 6'5", 350 pounds. He is a big old hunk of meat down in there. And that's exactly what USC needed. You know, these types of big bodies, they're a lot like those 7-footers that Purdue gets on the basketball court, right? When you have these 7-footers on the basketball court, the ball is just closer to them than everybody else. So it's much easier to rebound, even if they're freshmen or young guys and they don't have a lot of skills. Just lob it to them and they can just tip the ball in. They don't need a lot of skill. Their height and their frame alone is going to help them out. I kind of feel a lot the same about these type of defensive tackles that they're bringing in. They can just be space eaters at the very least. At the very least, they can be space eaters, plugging gaps, taking up blockers. And that's, I think, is allow your linebackers and other guys to flow to the football quicker and find the football quicker instead of offensive linemen being able to get off you and get to the second level. So having that type of meat, having that type of size on the inside is certainly going to help USC. You look at what the Trojans have coming up. You look at defensive line. Braylon Shelby's back. Anthony Lucas, Cameron Fountain, Jakeem Stewart, right? He's sitting there at 270 pounds. I think he can play outside. He can play inside at the defensive tackle spot as well. Kobe Pepe at 315 is back. Gavin Meyer at 290. Judea Basiri sitting there at 290. You have a couple of guys sitting there at under 300 pounds. So you needed this type of size to be able to contend with some of these bigger Big Ten offensive lines in the middle as well. So on the defensive side, I think things are certainly trending in the right direction up front for the USC Trojans. Folks, there has been a lot of movement. There is going to be more movement. You know where to be dialed into to get some great analysis on games, on transfer portal movement, as well as right here on Big Ten 10. So leave all of your comments below on what you think your team did well. Did I miss anything? Which team out there is kind of maybe laying in the weeds a little bit? I know Wisconsin and UCLA both have gotten 16 commitments right now to try to bolster their rosters. That's the most right now in the Big Ten. So leave all your thoughts, transfer portal, in the comments below. I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.